Hey guys, it's Nicole. Welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, don't forget to subscribe. I like to post about books and music, mostly Taylor Swift. Today I'm going to be doing my last reading wrap-up of 2022. This will be encompassing the months of November and December. I ended up reading 105 books this year. If you would like to see all of the books that I read this year, just be sure to go check out my reading wrap-up playlist. I started doing wrap-ups in January of last year, so every single book will be in there comprehensively. Reading wrap-ups are my least popular book-related videos, so I think I might only do like 1 or 2 a year from now on, like either a complete year wrap-up or like a 6-month type of thing. I end up getting more views on recommendation videos and reading vlogs. Typically, we'll see how this one does, and let me know down below if there's a way you'd prefer me to do it. And without further ado, let's just get into the wrap-up of these last 2 months. So first I read Infernal Fall at the beginning of November. This was a book that I was sent by the author and he paid me to promote it. I already reviewed it in, I think, a recommendations video. It ended up being 3 out of 5 stars. It was kind of more of a modern retelling of Dante's Inferno, which I have not read. I feel like I might be missing some context because of that. I do want to read the Dante's Inferno. I think it's a trilogy. It's an Italian classic. Some strong points of this book was the character development and the dialogue. There were elements from the Bible, there were elements of mythology. I guess it's kind of like Christian fantasy. I'm not too familiar with characters from the Bible or even mythology, if I'm being honest, as well as the source material, so I think a little bit of context is missing, but I did appreciate it for what it was, and I liked the writing style. I did what I set out to do at the end of 2022, which was finally finish the Warrior Cats series that I started in 2021. I did take several breaks though, and I finished up all of the novellas, so I'm just gonna go through those quickly. Red Tail's Debt, this was 3 out of 5. This book was like watching a car crash because you know what happens because of the main series if you've already read that. It was okay, but maybe not like completely necessary because we already knew what happened. It was just from a different perspective. Next I read Tawny Pelt's Clan. This one was 3 out of 5 as well. I'm pretty sure this is where the last arc that was published actually leaves off. This might be in between arcs depending on when the next one that is published ends up starting, because yes, this series is not over yet. I would like to see how it ends. That's why I'm continuing it, because I genuinely want to know how they're going to end something like this. This was okay again. Next I read Shadow Star's Life. This one was 3 out of 5. This one was okay again. This one has some characters from the prequel series, which I did enjoy seeing even if the plot wasn't super interesting. And because this takes place in the past before the bulk of this storyline in this entire series, we do kind of know what ends up happening. Some of the characters think that they're going to be doomed, but obviously that doesn't happen because the series continues. It's just that the characters don't know this. Next I read Pebbleshine's Kits, 3 out of 5 again, but this had a really sad ending. I was really disappointed when one of the characters died. Even though we kind of saw it coming, I wasn't putting 2 and 2 together from the actual main series, because there were definitely hints in that one about this novella. One of the characters is dealing with grief, and I loved how that was written because it was so palpable. She grieves with these specific details and things she'll never get to experience with her loved ones who she lost. It's very disappointing and you feel a lot of empathy for this character. Next I read Tree's Roots, 3 out of 5 again. I really liked reading about seeing a more alternative lifestyle to the clans, and something that we've been reading about this entire series. I feel like finally the authors did something different with exploring a different way of living. The main character is kind of giving Harry Potter, like the character Harry Potter, because of his relationship with his parents, if you get what I'm saying. Next I read Mothwing's Secrets, so this was also 3 out of 5. It was okay, but it just brought nothing new to the table that we hadn't seen before in the main arcs. Next I read Daisy's Kin, 3 out of 5 again. It was fine. It was kind of boring. The main character ends up going on this whole adventure, and it seems like she's going to choose something that is not super reflective of her character up to this point, but then it just kind of goes where you would have predicted it would go, so it doesn't seem like she goes through any character development at all. Next I read Spotford's Rebellion, 3 out of 5. It was okay again. I don't think it was necessary since we'd already seen the full picture. This is kind of the curse of some of the novellas. You can't really get into super new types of conflict because they are so short, and it kind of retells something that already happened in the main series, and because it is in such a short form, we see this one character grieving over another character, and in the main series it takes place over a very long period of time, but because the novella is so short, it looks like it happened very quickly. Next I read Blackfoot's Reckoning, 3 out of 5. It was fine. So this was written in this concept style that hadn't really been done before, where the entire novella took place over one day, kind of like one evening, I guess. This is when Black Star gets his 9 lives to become leader. There's a ton of flashbacks through doing that, which is interesting because this series doesn't usually do time jumps. The main character is very morally gray. I feel like some people would like that. He seems like too much of a sheep to be a leader, but he has a redemption. I feel like some of the stuff he does is unforgivable, especially depending on who you ask, but I don't think it necessarily makes him a completely bad character. Next, I read the field guides, which are just kind of like comprehensive guides to the entire series because I just wanted to knock those out. Secrets of the Clans, this was 3 out of 5. It's just an organization of a lot of details that we'd seen told in the main arcs or the novellas or the super editions. Next was Cats of the Clans, 3 out of 5. This was in a cute bedtime story type of format, and it had such great colorful illustrations. That was definitely my favorite part of this. Next was Code of the Clans, 3 out of 5. This one just like really bored me. It just didn't hook me or grab me for any reason. I kind of got into a slump while reading the field guides. I think that's because they're just like kind of plotless. Maybe they should be like spaced out. Next is Battles of the Clans, so this was 3 out of 5 as well. This was told through a format of like each clan giving the audience, I guess, a tour through like their own territory. It kind of reminds me of the musical Cats, where they use the main character Victoria as like the reason they're explaining the entire world to the audience. She's kind of used as a vessel. We kind of see that happening in this book. It's kind of similar. It's mostly just an information book. There is no plot, again, as usual with the field guides. And then lastly was the ultimate guide, 3 out of 5 again. Not very interesting because there's no plot. It's just a recap. And while I was reading it, I didn't remember how many cats have such tragic backstories. So I think this is really helpful as kind of a refresher. I think if you forget who a character is, which happens sometimes because there are just so many, this would be really helpful to have on hand while you're reading the main series. Okay, then I only read 3 books in the month of December, but they were very strong reads, very solid 4 stars for all 3 of them, and I had already hit over 100 books by that point, so I wasn't too pressed about reading a ton in December. Usually that's when people really put it into overdrive because they want to meet their goal, but yeah, this year I didn't have to stress at all. So I read the Mr. Mercedes series. It is a trilogy, but there's kind of like an extension to it using one of the characters from the Mr. Mercedes trilogy. She gets her own like spin-off 2-book thing, but she starts off in the Mr. Mercedes series. This was a hell of an adventure. I want to actually like talk about this for a minute. So Mr. Mercedes is the first book, and I'd only ever read Carrie by Stephen King, so I always kind of thought of him as someone who does like this supernatural paranormal type of horror, but this is definitely like a true crime style. I don't want to say mystery because we're given the point of view of the detective and then the point of view of the killer. So the audience knows what's happening and who the killer is, but the detective doesn't. So it's like you watch these clues and you see things really unfolding before his eyes, and as he discovers who it actually is. That's very satisfying to me because I am so bad about missing like Easter eggs and clues in a book because I just don't know who the perpetrator is. So I never really get the full experience unless I reread it. So I really appreciated that Stephen King like let us know who it is. He just let us watch Detective Hodges struggle to figure it out who it was. We weren't struggling ourselves, which I liked. Basically, the series follows the premise of this guy who is just insane, and he ends up stealing this Mercedes and running it into a crowd of people who are waiting at a job fair, and he ends up killing 8 or 9 people and injuring a whole bunch more. And the detective who is assigned to this case ends up working on it for a couple of years, and he just can't figure out who did it, and he ends up having to retire at some point, and it kind of haunts him that he wasn't able to get justice for these victims. And then suddenly the killer starts contacting him and like taunting him and assumes that this is going to drive the detective to sewer slide, but it ends up actually giving him a reason to live. And so we watch him trying to figure out what exactly happened that day, who this person is, and then we also get the point of view of the guy who committed the crime, so we know who it is, and we see how his mind works. And being in his point of view is the most uncomfortable, disgusting, disturbing experience of my life. I almost threw up at one point while reading from his perspective. I didn't want to be in his head any longer. It was rough, but it was still so good. It was so well written and plot driven, and I do really like a dual point of view story because it keeps things really interesting. It keeps things from getting dry and stale. I also like how Stephen King has very, very short chapters because then it becomes very addictive. You're like, oh, it's just like 2 more pages for this chapter, so I'll just read that, and the next thing you know, you're like done with the book. I did go a little bit slowly with this series. It took me the entire month to read all 3 books. That's just because I was kind of like relaxing a little, and I was pretty busy with my birthday and Christmas Christmas and everything. I'm currently watching the TV show and they are fucking up these characters so bad. I just finished the first season last night. I really like the ending. I'm not mad about anything that they changed. Like, I'm pretty flexible when it comes to movie or TV show adaptations of my favorite books because I understand some things need to be a little different or some things might need to be taken away as far as like the plot and the structure goes, but they are completely changing up these characters so much and it's just kind of pissing me off. I find I only really get mad about TV show and movie adaptations if they are making me wish that they would have done more in terms of the characters. Like, I understand some minor characters may not be as developed because they just don't have the kind of screen time that a book allows, but it was the two main characters, the detective and the perpetrator. And the detective in the book, he's definitely a little bit questionable. He has a short temper, but you can see he has very well intentions. And in the TV show, they made him so angry. They made him a huge asshole. He looks so aggressive, and that's just not how he comes off in the book. He's a detective. He's supposed to have an air about him that makes people want to confess. He needs to have a way with people, a way of getting information, and the actor and the way the character is written in the TV show is just terrible. He's so annoying and short-tempered, and he yells at a bartender for saying no problem instead of you're welcome. The Hodges I know would never do that. They also completely changed up this scene. In the book, what happens is he finds these kids picking on this other kid and he ends up threatening the group of kids that are bullying the other kid. And yeah, it's definitely questionable because these are minors, but like, you understand why he's doing it. He's trying to help out this kid who's being targeted, even though you definitely shouldn't threaten minors. And in the TV show, they just have him run outside and yell at these kids for playing ball on his street because they keep getting balls in his bushes. And it's like, why are you just making him terrible? And then what they did with the killer, Brady, is they made him like sweet. And I understand to an extent it was to show how he can manipulate people into believing he could never be capable of doing something like he did. But I think Stephen King gave us a perfect example of someone who is that sick and twisted in the head with like screws missing. And they really, really romanticized him in the TV show. And I think there's like a demand for that almost. We see so many people romanticizing killers and they just did that to the extreme in the TV show. They had him kill a white supremacist homophobe, which like doesn't happen in the books straight up. It also makes you feel like you want to kind of root for him in the TV show. I know they were trying to build this weird sympathy for him, which I did not like because at the heart of it, this character is actually very racist and homophobic himself. So it just doesn't make any sense. We see these like sensitive sides to him and it's really not that bad to watch the scenes of the TV show from his point of view. But in the book, you are literally physically uncomfortable the entire time it's his point of view. You just want to go back to Hodges' point of view, but it's also like a car crash. You just can't look away. It's like, it's so nauseating and the TV show just doesn't do that for me because he comes off way too like normal. And I kind of do see what they were doing, as I said, in trying to show him as manipulative, but it's just, there were a lot of signs and he was really, really awful in a lot of ways. And I really don't see why they made Bill Hodges so horrible in the TV show. Like, why? I don't see the purpose of that. I see the purpose of showing Brady having a sweet side because it shows how he's manipulative, but they like flipped the character almost. Like all of the horrible things Brady did, they made that a little bit less so in the TV show, and anything that was semi-questionable but backed by good intentions from Hodges, they made it like no good intentions at all, just him being an asshole in the TV show. And it's so hard to root for him, and in the book you're like, yes, yes, please catch this guy. He's making me nauseated. He's making me ill every time I see what's going on in his head. Please catch him, and that's what keeps you turning the pages. When he yelled at that bartender and went on that boomer rant about how you're supposed to say you're welcome and not no problem, I almost turned off the show. I was like, I can't do this, but I'm glad I didn't because the ending was really interesting. They changed the ending up a little bit and I'm glad they did because it was visually very interesting and clever and they made it like even more intense, and I did appreciate that. As I said, I'm not super picky with adaptations. As long as there is a visible reason that you're doing something and you're doing right by the author's intentions, I'm not that picky. But yeah, this was a 4 out of 5 book. I still think Carrie was better. Carrie was 5 out of 5. I think King's supernatural stuff in general is just a little bit better. I believe that's what he's more known for, but this really kept me turning the pages. I said Brady's POV disgusts me, and it seems like King really understands nasty, messed up people. I think he truly does. He was like spoon feeding it to us, and the TV show producers were like, we're not gonna do that. Well, maybe on TV it would just be like not the best for ratings, I guess, if people are actively uncomfortable for like half the show because he has to share POVs with Hodges. I don't know. Maybe this is just me trying to defend their stupid decision. This is a very, very long book. It's over 600 pages, but it's just so engaging. The short chapters keep it addictive, as I said. Next I read Finders Keepers, which is the second second book in the Bill Hodges trilogy with the Mr. Mercedes guy. So this follows another crime and like another case that Hodges is assigned to. After the first book, he pretty much opens his own private investigator firm in his retirement, so he's not like a cop anymore, but he still does like cop-like things, I suppose. I really like that there weren't any like disgusting, nauseous scenes like the first one, because the first one there was a scene that just really did me in. I had to get up and pace around the room and think about how I need to keep my food down. The main character in this one, because Bill Hodges is kind of a secondary character in this one, the main character is 17. His name is Peter. He pretty much finds this buried chest that has a bunch of money and books in it, and he doesn't know who put it there. He kind of assumes whoever took it stole it and is now probably in jail for another crime. This is during the 2008 recession, so he decides to give the money to his parents by mailing it to his parents like once a month, I think. And you know, when you find something like that, it can definitely come back to bite you, because he knew this seems like stolen property for sure. But at the same time, this demonstrates a really good example of like the butterfly effect, because the whole reason his parents are struggling is because his father was in the Mercedes killings that happened in the first book, but he only ends up injured, which makes him unable to work for a while. He has to be in physical therapy. And so all of this is like Brady's fault still. So at the end, you're like, okay, this wasn't really relevant to Brady, but you're like, okay, I want him to die like a horrible death in the end. So like you're ready for the third book and for like a final conclusion where the original characters from the first book come back in. So the third book is End of Watch. This was also 4 out of 5. All 3 of these are just very consistently solid, not absolutely amazing, but definitely something I would recommend to anybody who likes crime or Stephen King's works or horror in general. So this was exactly what I wanted it to be. It was a very, very satisfying end. This was about as good as the first book. I think the second one was kind of like 3.5 out of 5, while the first and the third were definitely 4. The second one was a little detour to a different villain. Not gonna go too into that, but this one kind of comes full circle and wraps the entire thing up. It's very satisfying. It's really intense, just like the first one, because I think the Brady villain is just the better one from this series, more so than the second villain we see in the second book. Amazing plots. I like how it really started out as a realistic crime thriller, and then by the third book it develops into such a super outlandish paranormal type of story. It's kind of like sci-fi influences. There's like hypnosis involved. It's just very interesting and creepy, because King makes it sound so realistic even if it's not, and that's fucking horrifying, honestly, because it's way above the capabilities of the police force. So Hodges has to step in again and like use his intuition and what he knows about this killer, because he knows him so well compared to the other police officers, even though he's retired, but he's also like a PI. I think this is more what King is known for than the first book, which is just like realistic crime. So I think longtime King fans will really appreciate the ending. Very, very solid books for December. It was a very Stephen King Christmas for me. Those are all the books I read in the last 2 months. This year, I plan to read 100 books again. I really hope I can do it. Last year was the first year I was able to get to 100, let alone pass it. So I'm super excited. I would love to hear what your favorite book you read this year was. Please let me know down in the comments. Let me know how many books you want to read in 2023. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. If you want to follow me on my Instagram, it is right here. And if you want to follow me on my TikTok, that is right here. I will see you all in a few days for another video, and I hope you have an amazing day. Bye, guys.